Welcome back. I hope you had a good break. Such great discussions we're having. As I mentioned earlier, I'm learning so much, and I know that your own minds are being blown at this moment. Next, we will experience a discussion and presentation on the high-end real estate market. I'll pass it off to Christoph again.
Thank you, Naya. Good to be back. Thank you very much, and welcome back, everybody. After this interesting first panel, we now look closer at the asset class that is probably most accessible to the majority of our investment forum listeners, and that is real estate. And for this, I'm very pleased to introduce to you Knight Frank. Actually, probably doesn't need introduction. It's a global real estate consulting company that most of you will know. And Ian Lawrence and Arturo Pavani will present an overview of the Addis real estate market, its current state and developments. And thereafter, we're going to have a brief Q&A session with them, as well as with Dawit Solomon. Dawit is a co-founder and a managing partner of BIGAR, one of Ethiopia's best engineering and design firms. And I'm particularly pleased to have him on board because Dawit has been involved in numerous real estate projects across Ethiopia, Addis and elsewhere. And he really is best placed to comment on and question Knight Frank's presentation. As before, to the audience, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I will let Ian and Arturo introduce themselves, and over to you.
Thank you, Christoph. Arturo is just going to put up a presentation that we've prepared for the delegates this afternoon. So he's just going to share his screen. Excellent. Thank you, Arturo. And thank you again, Christoph. And good afternoon to the delegates. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon talking about a very exciting market. My name is Ian Lawrence. I'm a director at Knight Frank-EMC with over 10 years experience in the Ethiopian real estate market, working on various different projects. I'm joined this afternoon by Arturo Pavani, who is the head of research at EMC and is similarly experienced in the real estate market in Ethiopia. And he's got a special focus on the residential market. So Arturo will be taking us through our research on the residential market in Addis Ababa, comparing Addis Ababa with other African cities and providing an overview of the high-end residential market in Addis Ababa. But before that, I'll just provide a brief introduction to Knight Frank and EMC. So you can see Knight Frank are renowned. As Christoph mentioned kindly, Knight Frank are quite well known. They're renowned for advising on high-end residential property in global markets, but many are less aware of Knight Frank EMC's commercial advisory services and clients. This image provides an example of the clients, and it's fair to say that the team has successfully completed projects for Fortune 100 companies, governments, NGOs, sovereign wealth funds and investors on a global basis. In Africa, Knight Frank have 22 offices across 9 territories, employing 500 people, so a significant business. Knight Frank also has a joint venture with EMC, which is a niche real estate practice that has been providing real estate advice across Africa for over 15 years in many different markets. Specifically, you can see here a list of real estate services provided across Africa, including markets and investment, valuation advisory services, residential consulting. In relation to research specifically, Knight Frank EMC have been publishing market reports on Africa since 2007. And I'm pleased to let you know that Rothstone will make available to participants the latest Knight Frank African report, providing an overview of the real estate markets across Africa. But without further ado, I'll pass you on to Arturo, who's going to take us through our research of the residential market, and specifically the sort of high-end residential market in Addis Ababa. So over to you, Arturo.
Thank you very much, Ian. As mentioned, I am head of research at Knight Frank-EMC. And today I will be going through this quick but hopefully insightful presentation about our experience in Addis Ababa and Ethiopia, with a special focus on the high-end residential market. So just to start with a bit of a general overview, a few of the key takeaways that we have seen in Addis are, first of all, limited stock of prime real estate, showing little availability both in residential and in these other sectors as well, such as commercial. The pipeline is also relatively modest in the city center, with bigger developments taking place in peripheric neighborhoods, but those wouldn't be grade A. And in terms of targets, foreign tenants are expected to want to live closer to the city center and Bole areas rather than in the periphery. And this is because of the traffic and commuting times, but also the vicinity, of course, with the headquarters of different, both foreign and major local companies. Local buyers or tenants, on the other hand, have been buying and leasing properties in the peripheric areas more consistently, appreciating the more competitive prices, and this goes despite the generally inferior quality of these properties. In terms of issues, a few of these have been already touched by other panelists before us, so I will just go through them very quickly. There is the issue of currency, which is also, on one hand, one could also look at it as an opportunity for real estate because it limits the other classes of investment. The issue of energy, where backup generators and similar systems have always to be put in place to make up for the lack of stability in general of the public infrastructure. And this goes as well with roads, and ultimately there is the issue of both skills and materials. So I was trained an architect, and sometimes it's a common mistake to see developers entering a market without understanding exactly the specificities in terms of necessary skills and their availability locally. And this goes for skills, but also for materials, of course, where sometimes there is a surprise when lack of availability leads to very high costs at in a later stage, because these have to be imported, for example. We've already heard how Addis Ababa and Ethiopia in general are quite unique. But we wanted to take a look at our data to make sure that we weren't missing anything. And at Knight Frank-EMC, we have built over the years sort of treasure trove of historical property data across many different sectors, from residential to commercial, industrial, and retail. And in some countries, this data goes back to 2007. In the case of Ethiopia, we started in 2015. And we tried to compare these average rent prices for a 3 to 4 bedroom grade A residential properties with with other African countries. And we could only notice a little bit of a similar inflection when it comes to Ghana. And this was mostly due because of the currency devaluation in both cases. So what we came to understand and confirm is the unique opportunity that Ethiopia and Addis Ababa represent in the real estate sector. These data have already been shown and mentioned before: the demographic advantage, the economic potential, the fact that the country is reducing poverty. These are all very important factors, and when linked and joined with a government that has a vision, like the Ethiopian government on a long term, this creates an environment that is quite unique and we think full of potential. And to start with the strength of the residential real estate market, we see a growing expert community, strong end user leasing demand for high-end properties. The fact that the competition is not, there is not a lot of competition because the local developers generally build to lower standards, not in all cases, but in general. And also the fact that this is a fast-moving market. So it's quite dynamic, and it's important to enter at the right stage to be, among the first to benefit from this, I think. And in this case, we think that Roxanne have done a good job with that. Opportunities, well, there is this, we call it an outward-looking vision. So it's, again, a vision about the future of growth and inclusion. And we think this is beneficial for everybody, ultimately. The potential opening of the financial sector or the privatization of certain companies, as we've seen, or sectors, as we've seen with Vodafone. The lack of high-end stock, the small and exclusive apartment blocks that represent the current kind of state of the art of grade A and of the grade A market, and something that is both an opportunity and a threat: the potential opening of the property market to foreigners. Among the weaknesses, we see property maintenance is something that is very difficult and very few landlords put in place. And so even if a property is developed to a high standard, then its value decreases quite quickly over time because of lack of maintenance. So we think this is something that anybody looking into invest and develop something in this market should take into account. The high-end leasing market is limited. In the financing market is relatively immature, and there are some barriers to market entry and business difficulty, the red tape that was mentioned before. In terms of threats, again, there is the general geopolitical risk. Unfortunately, we've heard about that in the past year, and the potential opening again of the property market to foreigners, which is not only an opportunity but also a threat because it increases the competition, if you want. To focus more closely on the high-end sector, we have in our research we have surveyed over 30 residential developments across every grade in Addis Ababa. And we have compiled and indexed these properties, and we came to the conclusion that we have estimated the current stock of being at less than 20,000 square meters for grade A residential. And this was mostly sold out and was made of, and fragmented, made of relatively small developments. The pipeline is a little bit more consistent at around 70,000 square meters, but again, this is already partially sold out, and current availability, and this was up to date probably last year, I think, with under 30,000 square meters that are were available for purchase. And this amounts to basically 300 apartments, which really isn't much. And Another thing that must be mentioned are the stalled or delayed developments, which could have an impact in case they were to resume and increase the pipeline size could increase the pipeline size quite considerably. Another thing worth mentioning, we think, is that in terms of households, the number of middle socioeconomic households are forecast to continue to grow over the coming 10 years, which is anticipated will fuel local demand for good quality residential property. And I think good quality is the key word here. And I know that it will be something that will be analyzed in one of the next interventions here. So quality is a big thing to take a look on when looking at the residential market here, even the high-end one. There is a lot of disparity. So we just included a little map of all the properties that we analyzed in our research. And the main destinations that we saw for grade A are Showa family urban flats, Metropolitan. There are a couple of developments, Sarbe Gabriel and Midtown, the Legacy Apartments, Villa Apartments, Elevation Residence, and Eagle Hills Lagar, major development that is currently being delayed, although the pilot phase has broken ground and is under construction. To conclude, we think that the high-end residential market in Addis Ababa is full of potentials and challenges. As mentioned before, if it was easy, we wouldn't be here talking about it. And inexperience and lack of planning demonstrated by local developers, coupled with a dearth of finance and hard currency, have created a large number of stalled construction projects that are unlikely to represent good quality buildings should they ever be completed, but they still represent a question mark over the future of the pipeline. For the moment, in any case, supply and pipeline are low. Demand continues unabated and is principally from diaspora and locally wealthy Ethiopians. Given that, again, they have limited options for their investment, high-end real estate is one of the main ones for sure. And absorption because of high-end properties is steady, with apartments of high-end developments often selling before a building is complete. Given the constraints of foreign currency, demand for AA property is also driven by both some locals and diaspora looking to dollarize their investment, as was mentioned before. And in our research, we have quantified the returns for rental yield for grade A residential properties at around 9%, with an average rent price of $4,000 for a 3 to 4 bedroom. I try to keep it as concise as possible so that we can have hopefully, interesting conversation. And thank you very much for this opportunity. I'll give the word back to Christoph. So thank you again. I'm gonna quit the slideshow now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Arturo. Thank you, Ian. Very important, very interesting discussion. Very insightful. And I must say, for anyone who's been looking at this real estate market, there's not enough structure and there's a lack of information, I think, as we all know. So good to see that you guys are working to resolve that issue. And I think you already put a few nice pointers out. So in the interest of time, let's start and jump into the questions. So may I start with one point I was interested in. So if I understood you correctly, the supply and demand is as follows. You have continued and growing demand from the international community, the Vodafones of this world, of course, diaspora investors, diplomatic missions, which are not going anywhere, NGOs, which even in current uncertain times, will actually have more people, sadly enough. And they all need housing, and they all want international standard housing. And the same token, you have very limited supply, and I understand that some of that is delayed or stalled. You have some things like Gefita moving ahead. You have others that aren't, but you have very limited grade A supply. The question is, if that is correct, what do you think will happen to the yields on the grade B, on the lesser quality housing stock over the years? And I think anyone who's been to Addis has seen also a lot of the unfinished structures, the skeletons standing there. But also, if I'm an investor and I want to come into the market and I need to decide, well, am I actually going to pay, I don't know, $300,000-$400,000 for an apartment, or am I going to pay $100,000 for grade B? And I think in the past you would have been able to get very good rental yields on lower priced real estate. Taking what you've said, how do you see that? What do you think is going to happen to the grade Bs, and how would you answer this question?
Should I take that, Christoph? Well, I'll start the ball rolling, and then maybe Dawit might have a view on this as well. But you know, we've got a very interesting situation in Addis Ababa, as you know, and as has been talked about up to now, of a very polarized market where the grade B properties are significantly different to the grade A properties and residential buildings that are being marketed. So I think Arturo touched on it earlier. You know, with any investment, it's incredibly important to manage it. Once it's no good just making an investment and walking away and hoping it's going to improve. It's property management is absolutely key to maintaining that investment going forward. And I think that the significant impact on the grade B properties will be the lack of the professional property management, which will create maintenance problems and in the worst case, I think, make properties uninhabitable going forward. And we see this with on another scale with affordable houses, where elevators are put in and then break and aren't able to be maintained. And you have this sort of inverse value chain looking vertically at a property where in many markets, the higher up the building you go, the more valuable the apartment is. Whereas in Addis, in many cases, it's the inverse of that, because purchasers are concerned about that maintenance problem. But so I think that that's going to have be the significant problem with grade B properties, as we're calling them. Dawit, would you have any sort of comments on that?
Thank you for that, Ian. Yes, you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. I think to add to what you said, what would happen to grade B properties is grade B properties are generally outside the reach of majority of Ethiopians. So once grade A properties are, well, what's currently happening in the country is once grade A properties are fully occupied by people who can afford them, then people have no choice but to look at grade B properties. But if more and more grade A properties come into the market, then it actually means, it could mean that grade B properties will soon be out of the market, because they're really out of reach for majority of Ethiopians. This also means it creates a lot of opportunities for affordable housing to be developed in the country going forward. So this is also a very good opportunity for developers who are well versed in developing affordable housing to come into the market and look into this as well.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you, Ian. Thank you, Dawit. And Dawit, if I can just touch on that, and just to make sure we're all aligned also with the audience, grade A and grade be when we talk about that? I mean, can you comment on, I guess, not the definition of building quality, but I guess we're seeing grade A as what you would see as a standard quality in the US or Europe, I assume. How do you see that? And also importantly, it's of course not just the finishings, right? It's much more, it's the design, it's the engineering, it's the planning, also the whole development process, which fundamentally and ultimately leads to the quality of the end product. You have tons of experience with dozens, if not hundreds of projects that you guys have done over the years and helped. How do you see that quality? In which sectors is it? How is it developing? How do you see new projects currently coming on stream, comparing to slightly older ones? And I guess again also the question on all the skeletons that still sit here where the shell core is being built. You can see the skyline littered with them, and some of them have been like this for years. What will happen to them?
That's a great question, Christoph. Quality is defined unfortunately, in many ways in Ethiopia, but let me give you an example of the common things that we encounter in my practice. We have clients coming in having a very ambitious plan, and they want to develop a very high-end development, be it real estate or retail buildings, hospitals, or whatever it may be. And what we tend to see throughout the process of the design as well as the construction is people slowly realize that it's a very expensive venture, and they try to compromise on the quality. And by quality, I mean the quality of construction, quality of the contractors, and also the design team that you appoint. And they start to compromise, and decision tends to be made solely focusing on the cost of the project and not necessarily on the quality side of it. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is quality is defined not only by the type of material that you use. It's not necessarily because you've used a very expensive or a branded material. It is defined from the very beginning of the design phase. It's quality of design, quality of the spaces that you produce, and also the functionality of the building. One of the important thing to mention here is that Ethiopia it cannot afford to demolish all the buildings that it has built and rebuild them to meet the standards that it should have met from the very beginning. Unfortunately, this can be said for most of the buildings in the country. But from the very beginning, we have to focus on quality from a standpoint of functionality and also the economic situation in the country. So this is one thing we should look at, and the other thing is we also have to use latest regulations and design standards that are currently available in the country and also internationally. So in order to attract international developers and expats in the country, we have to look at the quality of the spaces and the international standards that we have to satisfy going forward. It's also very important to mention that Ethiopia has never, in my opinion, been an outward-looking country as much as it is now. So this means there's a lot of international interest coming into the country, which also means our buildings and our infrastructure has to correlate to the demands of the international community, and also increase the awareness and know-how of locals in doing so. I hope I've answered your question, Chris.
Yeah, very much so. No, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Dawit. And maybe talking, and I guess it's part of quality. It's part of value protection. Arturo and Ian, you mentioned in the presentation, Ian, I think you mentioned already now, the importance of building management or property management, right? And of course, it has a major effect on the value of your investment, because if you invest in a property that's not been cared and looked after, then it loses value, which is the point I think you made. So just understanding this a bit better, I mean, I guess there's a design aspect of a building that facilitates or makes more difficult property management, I would assume. But to a large extent, this is also a question of focus, of wanting to have a building well maintained, and then ultimately the local capabilities in the market. So since it's such an important point, how do you see property management capabilities and how does it affect investment decisions?
If you don't mind, I just wanted to give a quick follow-up to what Dawit just says about quality before we get into the property management side. And absolutely. I just wanted to mention the importance and the key of what he said and the shift in perspective that this requires from all the stakeholders involved, from the investors to the ultimate buyers of this property, as a higher quality building will require higher costs, and it will be more difficult to build, design, and but the value of its proposition will be higher across over time. While a lower quality development, a lower quality building will be cheaper, more affordable for sure, but then that investment will not be as strong over time. And I think this requires a shift of perspective from all the actors, not just the investors, not just the final users. And I think what he said with mentioning the outward-looking vision, I think it's a very good case, and it's a very good way of putting the fact that this shift is happening. And to be at the forefront of this shift will put everybody who is there in an advantage position, because it's more difficult, it's more expensive, but then if you can actually prove your advantage and your added quality, buyers will appreciate that over time. And one thing that we've seen with our experience in Addis is that local buyers remember. So if you're a developer and you deliver on time and your buildings deliver a good standard of quality, buyers will be confident in you, will have the confidence of buying while a project is still under development. On the other hand, if you lose that confidence, if you show that you can't deliver on time, if your building gets delayed or stalled, people will lose that confidence. They will remember, they will not buy before they see the final product. They will not put their money until they can regain that confidence. So those are things that we think are specific to Addis in a way, and very important to keep in mind when discussing this. Sorry, Ian, I'll leave you to the property management side. I just wanted to add this couple of things.
No, I think that was really interesting. Thank you, Arturo. And I think we probably have sort of made the point about property management. But I just following on from what Arturo was saying there, I think, you know, the market is changing, and you can see the change. And you know, properties like Elevation Residence, for example, show you that the expat market, at least at the moment, is willing and able to pay for quality. You know, that's setting new rental highs in the market, and that reflects a sort of a well-conceived and built and a project. So it's not just about, as we know, it's about the design, the engineering, the architecture, the concept, the build, right through to then the management of the property thereafter. And that's key. You know, you've got to get all these things in place, and this is what the high-end market, although albeit very, very small at the moment, is achieving in Addis Ababa. And there'll be a flight to quality, and people will move to that quality. And I think, as Dawit said, that the sort of grade B properties will struggle in the future, because that's what will happen. The market will and is becoming more sophisticated. There's very good quality products being delivered, and this is what we've seen in other markets as well. If you look at Accra, Abidjan, or Maputo, or Kampala, Nairobi, you just see this happening in our lifetimes. Over a period of time, this is what happens, and it will happen as sure as we're sat here in Addis Ababa. But one thing I would say, Christoph, is, and this is where you guys are at the moment, and some other developers that are doing sort of very high quality grade A properties, is that you get a first mover advantage, and that's pretty key, I think. As Arturo said, you get the confidence of the market behind you, and I've seen this with Portuguese developers down in Maputo, where they delivered what they said they were going to deliver, and next time their properties are purchased off of plan, and again, and it's and the people that aren't able to deliver have the opposite effect.
Yeah, no, fully agreed. And I think also what you say, what we see in other markets, right? I think you come into an early stage market and you don't find any. I think all of us who've been renting and looking for space in Addis one time or another will have seen the inability really of finding adequate stuff, and what is available is just not it's just not good. So you deal with it until you don't have to deal with it anymore, right? And then somebody comes in and he provides a better product, and if you have to shelve out $3,000-$4,000 or whatever it is per month in rental, you rather do it in a better building than a building that is of less quality. And like you said, that's a very, very standard trend that you're seeing throughout. Absolutely. Dawit, maybe to you, and a question that's slightly shifting to also quality, but also the specialty and the uniqueness of Ethiopia. I think you have a country with such a strong heritage, with you have culture, you have traditions, and you see buildings coming up, and a lot of the buildings that you're seeing, they don't really incorporate anything local, anything that blends in with the local cultures and traditions. They look copy paste, either Chinese or maybe European, I don't know, or South African or Dubai or whatever. Is that the future? Is that the sort of grade A that we're seeing coming up, or do you think there will be more and more, let me say, sophistication on that, and also talking about sustainability, green buildings, all of these trends which haven't really come here yet? How do you see that?
Again, great question, Chris. The short answer is I hope not. I hope not. That's not the case. But I've had experiences where I've had a customer come into the office and say, "Look, Dawit, this is what I want you to design." And what he's done, he went to Dubai, took a picture of the building, and he says, "This is what I want." There are people like this. There are people who don't realize the uniqueness of Ethiopia and what we have to offer, not only for ourselves, but also for the expat community and the international community that exists in the country. So from a design perspective, how you answer this question is, we as Ethiopians, we have a very unique lifestyle. We have certain cultural norms that are not common in, let's say, in Europe or in Dubai or in the Middle East in general. So we have to address these things in design, and it's quite simple to do. It's just a matter of appreciating that these things exist, and we have to allow for them. I'll give you two examples where this this can be answered as well. We have recently completed this a project here in Addis Ababa where the client was really pushing back, and he was keen on developing or maximizing on the plot of land that they had. And what we insisted in doing is something that is very unique. It's not, we were trying to deliver quality instead of quantity, which is what's common, and people are trying, because the land value in Ethiopia is quite high, and people want to maximize on that. And what we try to achieve here is to focus only on quality and give something, produce a product that no other developer was producing. And the end result was the customer was able to rent this to an organization at a very, very, very high rate compared to what the rest of the competition is doing. So, and how we've done this is incorporated an Ethiopian component into the building. So we allowed for how we handle funerals, we allowed for how we handle weddings, birthdays, and things like that in the design of the building. And it was very easy for the customer to sell the apartments, and in some cases rent. So the trend looks like it's changing, but it has to be forced by those who understand the problem. And by this I mean developers and professionals like ourselves, and also showing to customers or clients or developers who may not be aware of the situation what can be done and what the returns or the advantages could be going forward.
Yeah, understood. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you. I think I'm looking at a few questions and answers here as we're also coming slowly to the end of this session. I think a number of points have been addressed. Maybe on a data point, Arturo and Ian, price points of grade A and grade B. Can you enlighten a little bit the audience? What would an investor have to shelf out for a grade A or project nowadays? Would you happen to know?
So one thing, the price for grade A residential in Addis, is that the question?
Yes.
Oh,
I believe so.
I think it varies quite a bit. Per square meter, we think it would be somewhere around, say, $2,000 per square meter, but this is an average. And the thing is that the market right now is quite heterogeneous. So you would have properties that command 3,000 and others almost 3,000 and others that go below 2,000. So north of 2,000, one could say. But the thing is also, it's very difficult to give this information at the moment because of how little there is. So literally, you can go from one building. There are literally less than 20 buildings that there is that answer to. Yeah, probably more 10 than 20. That one could easily say, okay, this is a grade A destination. So it's really tricky because in one case, for example, maybe it's a respected developer and people are willing to pay that extra just for the name of the developer, really. This is something that happens. And another case is someone who maybe, doesn't have such a great history with their buildings. So even if the current option is a good one, people are skeptical to buy from them, so they have to lower their price. And when you have such a small pool of data, it's kind of difficult to give like a straight answer, but say between $2,000 and $3,000 per square meter.
Yeah, and it just to join in there, I think that's absolutely right. It's a valuer's nightmare. But on the yield perspective, we said the returns are sort of 9%, which is very good, for residential property. And You won't see that in Europe. But this is very specific in relation to the property, the tenant, and the currency and the specifics around the property. So we can only really be general. But then if you ask us specifically about one building or an apartment, then I think you could really delve down and come up with quite a detailed response on the sort of value proposition. But generally, a 9% return is what we're seeing. But I anticipate that will go down as well, with the quality of the buildings delivered, because what you'll see is you're going to get a better quality of building. You'll get a expat or more secure tenant that's leasing it for a period of time, maybe a diplomatic mission, or an NGO or a corporate, and the covenant strength of those will mean that people will be willing to pay more for the actual income stream. And therefore, what we'll see, and what we've seen in other markets, is a yield compression, all other things remaining equal. So we'll see sort of yields come down over time, which means as yields come down, capital values increase. So that's what we'd anticipate happening over the next period as these better quality products come onto the market, and at least to good quality tenants and covenant strength.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I must say that resonates with me, because what you're seeing is, as you said, a very heterogeneous market. There's no average price. And I think as an investor, you will want to go into the details. You want to see what is being offered. Back to what Dawit also said about the design quality. What type of product are you really seeing? Is it being done best in class or international standards? Does it adhere to the requirements also of the international rental market, right? Because I mean, one thing that you certainly see in the diplomatic missions and also the international organizations, corporations, and otherwise, they have higher and higher security and other standards that buildings need to adhere to in order to qualify. And there are many incentive and disincentive structures for employees and members of these organizations to choose buildings that adhere to these standards. Now, of course, in the beginning of the cycle, when in a city such, for example, Addis, there is no such building, well, there's nothing you can do. But once you have the choice, you will see one building that is caters for international business, that will see embassies, companies, etc., renting out. So you will have dollar yielding or foreign currency yielding, not only the yield itself on the price, but also receiving it in foreign currency, and also the duration of the lease and rental agreements. And I think that's a big differentiator. So yeah, I think with price points, be careful and do go down and see what is the best product in the market. Yeah. Dawit, I see you raised your hand on that, please.
Yeah, just to add on what Ian said, you can easily answer this question by expressing or by explaining what the rental yields in the country are. I'm not at liberty to mention the name of the project, but we have recently been involved in a project where the rental yields was somewhere in the region of 25%. And the reason why this happened was the developer developed something very, very specific, and there was nothing like it. So it's also safe to say that the international community in the near future is going to, more people are going to come into the country, and buildings won't be able to cope with the number of people coming into the country, at least in the short term. So this means rental yields will remain quite high going forward. If you're not able to say this is the average price for grade A apartments what the average price for grade apartments are in the country, you can express it by telling what the rental yields are currently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this goes back to Arturo's point in the presentation, also on the demand side, right? And the opportunities. There continues to be strong demand, and nothing's going to change that. So there will continue to be demand for this type of asset class. Right. I think there's one last question I'm seeing, and there are a few like it, regarding volatility in currency and inflationary pressures, etc. And what can one do to mitigate these painful results. And I think if I may on this as a finance person, well, the result, I mean, the way to mitigate is to invest money in inflation protected assets, right? And the problem having local currency, of course, first and foremost, is basically the lack of places where you can put it. And ideally, places where you can put it that yields foreign currency, right? So I think you see that in many countries where inflation rates are high as in Ethiopia today, or also much higher. Look at many countries in Africa actually are beyond what we're seeing in Ethiopia today. But yeah, it's inflation protected assets such as real estate, and the earlier you buy, you invest a certain amount of BER today, and just by being inflation and FX protected in a dollarized asset such as a grade A building apartment, you are protected from your investment, and in fact you can make a dollar return as well. I do believe we've come to the end. I've been giving a wink that we're overdue. So Dawit, Arturo, Ian, that was fantastic. Thank you very much. Good luck in all your projects, and hope to see you very soon. Naya, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you, Arturo. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Dawit, for all your insight. This has been incredibly helpful for all of us. I think what we've all learned on this panel today is that information is power. So we will take a break and come back in 5 minutes.